Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
We're probably going to talk about Brexit for an hour, although I'm quite drawn to the tale. In case you're wondering, what would we be doing if the political landscape wasn't so insane? And, of course, if this appalling terrorist atrocity hadn't unfolded in New Zealand overnight. I'll be looking for a little bit of light relief, usually at 12 noon. And the closest I can find is the tale of the young woman who was ordered off a plane for being inappropriately dressed. But of all the things that might not work on the radio, I know I could divert you to the website and tell you to have a look at her outfit, or there's a big picture of it across the double spread of the Daily Mail today. This isn't going to work on the radio. If I'd start describing her outfit to you, I'm going to sound like a massive pervert. It's pretty simple. It'll be like when Vic Reeves starts rubbing his thighs in Shooting Stars. It'll be like that kind of thing. And I'd be saying, oh, it's a very flimsy shoulder strap. So we all have our limits. I don't think I can, and I hope a colleague does, if they haven't already, rise to this particular challenge. I need to listen to someone who's handled this as a topic and learn. So we're going to talk about Brexit instead, where I wish there was something I could still learn, but as we've established very reluctantly and sadly, there isn't. The madness continues. These amendments and votes yesterday do whatever they want you to do, whatever you want them to do. So the People's Vote didn't want a vote yesterday on a People's Vote, so Labour whipped against it. The People's Vote organisation urged MPs not to vote for a People's Vote, which some people are failing to understand or pretending not to understand. I was in the first category briefly. I thought that's a bit odd. But then I thought of a football analogy, which hopefully helps everybody. When do you shoot? Do you shoot now when you're behind the halfway line and there's 14 players from both teams in front of you? Or do you hang on to the ball, maybe even pass it, in the hope and belief that 5 minutes down the line you're going to be in a much better opportunity to shoot? So I could be wrong about this, but I don't think I am. My reasoning on that fairly paltry 85 MPs who voted for it, as Labour whipped, I think, to abstain, is they don't want to shoot yet for the People's Vote. It's a big march on the 23rd, culminating in Hyde Park, where all sorts of superstars and heroes are going to be addressing the crowds. Yeah, all right. And me. And that seems to me to be the reason why, yes. Also, it would have got lost in the fog of yesterday's amount. I could be wrong. Maybe there was some bottling involved or some cowardice, but I don't think so. I think it was just, no. This is not the shot at goal we want. This will miss, so we're not going to take it. That's just my reasoning. And then some of the others, of course, in other areas, some of those other amendments are quite hard to unpick. I have seen authorities, people I respect, and they're thin on the ground these days, I have seen people I respect making polar opposite points in the last 24 hours, the last 12 hours. People saying this means we're definitely not leaving on the 29th of March, and people saying this makes the likelihood of no deal even greater, the likelihood of crashing out on the 29th of March even greater. I presume the ERG are engaged in some ridiculous confection, self-serving attempt to pretend that reality isn't reality. And this week, that's not GATT24 or technological solutions, it's the Vienna Convention. At what point, if you follow that Rees-Mogg, Andrew Bridgen, Marc Francois school of lunacy, at what point do you go, hang on a minute, they don't know what they're talking about? They're the ones that told me there were technological solutions to the problem in Ireland, and they're the ones that haven't been able to come up with any. They're the ones that told me we could trade for 10 years on our current terms because of GATT24, and they're the ones that were talking out of their posteriors. They're the ones that have claimed we can leave a treaty unilaterally because there are exceptional circumstances under the Vienna Convention or something. It's almost as if they just use fancy phrases in the hope that stupid people will not notice the scale of the nonsense that they're spouting. Isn't it? So where are you now, Brexit-wise? There were 3 people recommended to me at the beginning of 2017, I think it was. How long have you been working with me now? Because it was my previous producer, so it must have been the beginning of 2017. And I wanted, with your help, to assemble a list of what I called sensible levers, because I got a lovely tweet the other day. Do you remember when I said to you, I think on Tuesday, I said, it is absolutely outrageous to suggest that everybody who voted to leave the European Union is racist or stupid or both. I got a tweet after the show saying, I can't believe you called everyone who voted to leave the European Union racist and stupid on your programme this morning. And the sentence I literally issued after that, it is outrageous to suggest that everybody who voted to leave the European Union is racist or stupid or both. But some people listening to this will now be convinced that they just heard me describe everybody who voted to leave the European Union as racist or stupid or both. And I got an actual tweet saying, why did you call me racist or stupid or both? I don't know why I bother sometimes. Well, obviously I get paid. So 3 people recommended to me as sensible leavers. There was a 4th that I should have known about called Ben Kelly, who tweets as the Skeptic Isle. I mention him for reasons that I shall share with you in a moment. But of the 3 people that were recommended to me as so-called sensible leavers, 2 of them have now withdrawn their support for Brexit. They are called Oliver Norgrove, who I think was a Vote Leave staffer and is now doing a master's at university. I mentioned him yesterday. He got a bit carried away by my kind words and suggested that I might let him co-host Mystery Hour next week. I've had to put him back in his box. And another chap called Roland Smith, who is a fellow of the Adam Smith Institute, which I think fits into one of those categories that I'm quite sceptical about at the moment. But he was a informed and interesting contributor to this debate. We never got around to having them in the studio because we didn't really need to, given the madness of the switchboards whenever we address these issues. But he has also now withdrawn his support for Brexit on the perfectly pertinent grounds that our politicians, regardless of whether it was a deliverable dream or not, our politicians are categorically unable to deliver it. And you'll remember the poor souls who were charged with trying to deliver it are the ones that stuck around. The ones claiming that it was deliverable are the ones that ran for the hills at the first opportunity. So those are the 2 of the 3 recommended to me as sensible leavers. The 3rd recently tweeted that my biological mother should have aborted the fetus that eventually became me. So I think we can all agree I'm allowed to scratch him off any list described as sensible. The 4th person, who should have been recommended to me but wasn't, is a chap, as I say, called Ben Kelly, who tweets as the Skeptic Isle, which is a brilliant line. It's written for The Telegraph, various other places. And he published a very lengthy and informative thread yesterday. Essentially, he's not in favour of a second referendum. He wrote a very good piece, which I read, about how that might bring out the very worst in everybody. I disagree with him. I don't see how it could get any worse. But he published a fascinating thread about why he has also withdrawn his support for it, again, on the utterly irresistible grounds that the people delivering it are not up to the job. It leaves aside, of course, the question of whether or not it was ever deliverable. And that seems to me really interesting, as we hear these constant cries about how undemocratic a vote would be. Yeah, I'll say that again, because you did hear me correctly. How undemocratic a vote would be. I can't believe I need to say this out loud. A referendum is either reversible or democratic. It's either... I've got to get this absolutely right, haven't I? Yes. It's either reversible or democratic. No, it's either... Yeah, here we go. A referendum is either irreversible or democratic. It can't be both. If it's irreversible, it's not democratic, as Jacob Rees-Mogg himself explained in the House of Commons in 2012. And David Davis has written very persuasively about how ridiculous it would be to have a referendum and then fill in the blanks afterwards. Seems to have changed his tune now, but that's the price of having sold this pup to the country. A vote would be undemocratic. As these voices gain volume, and there is one powerful argument that I have nothing to resist, and that is very simply... The suggestion people are now so bored they don't care what happens next. That's a bit like the climate change mountain. If that's true, then I'm afraid it behoves those of us who do understand what has gone on, do understand what is going on, and have explained until we've gone blue in the face why what is now happening was always going to happen. I think we have to redouble our efforts if everybody else is getting bored, because you shouldn't be bored if you're a leaver. You should be really angry at the scale of the con that's been visited upon you. And the people that conned you are telling you to get angry with the people who told you you were being conned. And some of you still are. But what happened in the Commons yesterday, I think, through even more confusion and shade onto what was already the most confusing era in British political history, peacetime, certainly political history. Do you want to have a crack at explaining it? 0345 6060973. The defeat by 3 votes of Hilary Benn's amendment was good news for the government, I learned. But equally, the widespread perception of what happened yesterday is that Parliament somehow took back control, all of which seems to me to overlook the very, very bald fact that unless something is passed in Parliament in the next, bear with, 15, 14 days. Oh, it's a fortnight today, my dudes. So factor in the weekends. That's 10 working days before it happens. I'd quite like to have a little phone-in about how we've ended up 10 working days away from crashing out of the European Union with no deal whatsoever, when everybody told us that deals would be easy. They'd be queuing up to do deals with us, said David Davis. We'll hold all the cards, said Michael Gove. There'll be no tariffs on cars, said Digby Jones. I know I'm right, he said, hilariously. There'll be no bill, said Suella Braverman. We'll be in Berlin the morning after the results signing a deal with the German government, said David Davis. The easiest trade deal in history, said Liam Fox. 10 days. 10 working days to go. And nobody knows what's in the box. Well, actually, that's not true. 60-ish% of us know that the box is empty, always was empty, and always will be empty. About 40% of the electorate seems to be either desperately hoping that something appears in the box if they just cross their fingers and believe hard enough, or they're pretending that they wanted an empty box all along. I don't think I've missed anybody out. If you're a leaver and I've just misrepresented you, give me a call on 0345 6060973. Are you persuaded that something will still appear in that empty box if only people start believing enough and getting behind the country? Or are you now publicly claiming that you knew all along the box was empty, and the reason why you voted leave was because you knew all the Remain campaigners were telling the truth? And the question I'd really like you to answer is, how the hell did we allow this to happen to our wonderful country? How did we allow this to happen? And I'm afraid that takes us back to the tragedy in New Zealand overnight, because when you look at the posters that do make some of the points that would have been loudly cheered by those terrorists and were published by Leave.eu and their fellow travellers, you begin to realise that if you are going to use hatred, othering and propaganda to achieve a political goal, it's almost impossible to undo with reason, evidence and facts. So, what's going on? In a country where the elected government, which presides over a sovereign parliament, has conducted a whole host of economic forecasts designed to hopefully prepare the economy, the nation, the treasury for Brexit, and all of them paint a picture considerably worse than remaining in the European Union. But we have to ignore that because of the will of the people. So now we look at what is the worst possible scenario under the government's own forecasts, and the answer to that is, well, 14 days from today, we crash out with no deal or arrangement whatsoever, and nobody knows what happens next. I can tell you that some of the lorries being delayed on the approach to Calais are now arriving in Britain laden with goods that have already perished. This from a fruit and veg perspective. The word used by my contact in that industry was nibbled. The delays are now nibbling at fresh food supply. And of course, some of these trucks get turned around and sent back without being emptied, which presumably impacts upon transport infrastructure as well. But still, the madness continues. There is your box. Are you now arguing that you always knew it was empty, or are you still clinging to the notion that the EU will blink at the last minute and fill our box with riches? Malcolm's in Bournemouth. Malcolm, what would you like to say?
Well, I mean, like everyone else, I guess we're completely perplexed by the nonsense that we see unfolding in front of us. And my point is very simple, I think, and that's this, that if...
It's not. I'm not perplexed by the... It depends what nonsense you're referring to. What's happening this week was always going to happen from the moment... I mean, some people would argue from the moment the result came through, but certainly from the moment the red lines met the Good Friday Agreement, this became inevitable.
Yes, and the point I'm making follows on from what you just said about the damage that will happen to our country. Now, most MPs, I would imagine, understand this completely and absolutely.
Well, no, they don't. 250 voted on Monday to essentially facilitate no deal, which means they've got no understanding at all of how bad it would be.
Well, maybe therefore my point is an invalid one. My point is this, that if I spend my time knowingly and deliberately damaging my country, that is actually, is it not, tantamount to treason?
No, because that's the will of the people. 52% of the electorate voted to knowingly and willingly damage our country.
Good point. So there we are.
Well, what happens next? Malcolm, you're supposed to be coming up with answers and solutions, not problems and questions.
Well, I'm seeking your advice because I am completely in a mist and a fog about this one.
Yes.
All I do know is that I feel rather like you, that we had a country, maybe still have a country, that was open, welcoming, and...
It was flawed. I think austerity, probably historians of the future will put austerity much, much higher up the list of things that caused Brexit than we currently do, but...
Oh, indeed. And, of course, that's another issue, is it not? That
yes.
Many of the people who voted for Brexit come from the most deprived parts of the country. And those deprived parts of the country have had considerable EU investment.
I know you know this. I know this, but this is where you have to point out that many of the richest people in the country bankrolled Brexit and persuaded those people that their problems had been caused by the EU rather than by many of the richest people in the country.
Indeed. So what I ask is, what are they going to gain from it? Well, we know about the tax issues and the fact that the EU is going to be having a look at the riches of a lot of these people that get put in various places beyond touch. So that's one.
Yes.
Other reasons, I have no idea. Is it just a far right-wing agenda where they're trying to push us into some sort of horrible, jingoistic, racist, prejudiced, unthinking sort of country where we become people of which I don't want to become one?
Well, nor do I, and don't worry, we'll keep fighting the good fight. Of course, if you think that Malcolm is exaggerating or scaremongering, then you need to just have a quick glance across the Atlantic, where you will see that white supremacism, racist ideology, Islamophobia, sexism, weapons grade, dishonesty and corruption can march all the way to the top of the tree. 12:24 is the time. Just rounding up our week together talking about Brexit, because I think people would adjust their radios if I didn't. Let's go to Waterlooville next. Alan is there. Alan, what would you like to say?
Hello, James. We've spoken before. I'm from Kidderminster, if you remember.
You'll forgive me, Alan. I don't remember, but I
was born on Habley Estate.
I do remember. I remember that now. It's all falling into place. We didn't talk about Brexit
Right.
last time. I remember that.
No, we didn't. We were talking.
Well,
about
we got on so well. We're not going to fall out, are we, Alan? Or have you woken up?
I'm not falling out with anybody, James.
Good
apart
man.
from the fact that I believe you're wrong.
Uh-oh.
And I can tell you why the box is empty.
Which box?
Why my toaster ain't in the box.
Go on.
You've nicked it.
Who has?
You have.
Right, go on.
Well, it's the same analogy as I said to before, that
So by telling you that the box was always empty, I've stolen your toaster.
No, I don't believe the box was always empty.
No, I know you don't, but I do. And I said all along it was, but I accidentally found a toaster and stole it, did I?
No, the reason we haven't got it's like all your analogies. If you keep telling people we're going off a cliff edge, it's going to be a catastrophe. The whole world's going to end.
No one said that. No one said anyone. No one said that.
It's some of the
it's
analogies
the government's
coming out.
The government's own economic forecast is, I think, a 9% reduction in our economic performance under a no deal.
All the government's economic forecasts have been right 100% every time they've done one.
Of course, they're not 100% right. You silly sausage. Otherwise, you wouldn't need a chancellor. You just have a robot. You take the best of.
Sarcastic.
Well, don't do sarcasm, Alan, because it sounded actually slightly more intelligent than your non-sarcastic contributions.
All right, okay.
So tell me about this toaster that got stolen. What did it look like?
It was a beautiful toaster.
So tell me about that deal.
A beautiful toaster.
So this is a deal, is it? This is a deal that could have been done but hasn't been done. So describe it to me.
Yes. Well, I think David Davis was right. We had all the cards when we voted to leave. It was people like Theresa May who overrun him, and all the people who wouldn't accept democracy. This is
Alan,
exactly what's happened in Parliament.
Alan, come here a minute. How did David Davis vote on the last withdrawal agreement?
I don't know. I haven't been watching it. I've lost most of the interest in it.
Yeah. Why have you rung me then?
Because I think you're wrong. I do believe.
Well, then you need to. How did David Davis vote? How did David Davis vote?
Well, I think a lot of them are scared at not getting Brexit. I'm assuming
It's
that
not
he
what I'm
voted
asking
to
you.
accept the deal.
Is it? I'm pointing out to you the bloke you've just cited as having been right all along voted
Well, that's only because he was the Brexit secretary
voted for
at the
Theresa
time.
May's deal. Alan, the number of words does not increase the quality of the contribution. David Davis voted for the withdrawal agreement this week.
Yeah, because he's been blackmailed. He's terrified, like the most of us are, that it ain't going to happen.
Right.
We're being blackmailed into accepting a deal that's rubbish. And the alternative is...
But it is at least a toaster, Alan. It's not an empty box. You just said...
No, well, I had a beautiful toaster.
Yes, you keep saying that, but you can't tell me anything about it.
Well, it was...
How did it address the British border in Ireland, Alan?
Well, that's the sticking point, actually.
Oh, wow.
Because even I, who did months and months of research on whether to vote in or out, even I that thought I had all the boxes ticked, even I missed the Good Friday Agreement, and it was the only one I missed.
Right. See, the thing is about my analogy that you very kindly reinflated today, the whole point of my analogy is that the minute the Good Friday Agreement met the red lines, the non-existence of the toaster became inarguable, Alan.
Yeah, but my point is...
Don't keep saying my point is and then not making a point, Alan.
Well, I'm just let me speak and I'll make the point.
I have let you speak.
The point is that at the beginning of these negotiations 2.5 years ago, if we'd have followed the plan that we should have followed...
Go on, what's
this
that?
would have been done and dusted.
What's the plan we should have followed?
They should have created a Brexit committee...
No, the plan, not the personnel.
Well, that was the plan.
Go on.
Cameron should have created a Brexit committee, let them do the negotiations.
But Cameron was a liar. Cameron was Project Fear. Why would anyone have trusted him after the country had called him a liar?
Because, they obviously didn't, did they?
Didn't what?
You're speaking about people like yourself who wanted to remain.
No, I'm talking about people like you that wanted David Cameron to be in charge of leaving after the country had told him that his description...
I didn't want David Cameron.
So who was going to put that committee together then, Alan?
Well, whoever... David Cameron.
But you just said he wasn't in charge.
He was the Prime Minister at the time, wasn't he?
Yes.
We're speculating on what should have been...
No, we're just examining your theory on how things could have gone better, and at the moment, David Cameron should have stayed in charge. That's all I've got. So what would have happened next?
Were to form a Brexit committee.
Yes.
Of people who believed in what we were doing.
But David Cameron didn't. But David Cameron didn't believe in it.
I'm aware of that.
David Davis did.
Exactly.
And he was put in charge.
And all the negotiations
Boris
that
Johnson
did,
and he was Foreign Secretary. Yes.
Overruled him. That's why he resigned.
She didn't overrule him. He turned up on the very first day, said this will be the row of the summer, and rolled over after 27 minutes, mate. That had nothing to do with Theresa May. That was his first and probably last encounter with reality. But I really want to get a little bit deeper into your understanding of this issue. And I want you to describe to me, in as broader terms as you please, what this successful deal would have looked like. And it's a little unfair of me, because you've already admitted you haven't got a clue how to deal with the problem in Ireland, which is the biggest problem of all.
But that was the only one.
Well, you pointed it out on this programme several times.
I'm sure we could have come to an agreement that Northern Ireland, Southern Ireland and the EU would have accepted.
Yeah. But that sounds really silly now, because all of the evidence is that we couldn't. So now I say to you, what would that agreement be? And you say, let me speak. The point I'm making is David Cameron, or you say something else utterly irrelevant to the question that I'm asking. Tell me now what that deal in Ireland is that could have been achieved, because I'm telling you, as somebody who has been across the Good Friday Agreement since before the referendum, there is no earthly way that you could have two separate customs areas without having infrastructure on the border. Now, you think it could have been achieved, and now you're going to tell us how. Right.
Well, not being a customs expert, but having three friends...
Mate, you don't have to be a customs expert. You just have to speak English. Now, tell me how that could have been solved, in your own words.
Well, I have three mates who I play golf with, at the local course who are, between them, in excess of 100 years' experience.
Okay, well, tell me their solution then. What's their solution?
Their solution was they could do it electronically.
Right. Have a great weekend, Alan.
Well, okay, you too.
How did it come to this? Yesterday, I, as you know, gave up on penny drop moments many moons ago. I presumed as the evidence mounted that more and more people would feel their needle move and they'd realise that they'd been conned or misled or perhaps had fallen under the spell of some bad faith actors. But yesterday I played you footage of a British propagandist standing up in the European Parliament and begging foreign governments to frustrate the will of our sovereign parliament. And he, of course, was a key voice in that Brexit campaign, and a key platform of that Brexit campaign was that somehow foreign politicians and bureaucrats in Brussels prevent the British government, the British Parliament from being in proper control. And they've got no examples whatsoever of the British government being compelled to do things it didn't want to do by dint of our European Union membership, and yet one of the key cheerleaders for that school of thought, that utterly fraudulent and bogus school of thought, stood up in the European Parliament and explicitly requested foreign governments to frustrate the will of our sovereign British Parliament. So if you could hear that yesterday, I may play you the clip again, if you could hear that yesterday and not realise that you bought a car with no engine, you bought a box that doesn't contain a toaster, it is empty, you bought a lie, you bought a con, you bought a fat dose of snake oil, I've got nothing left. That is the point at which you either go, oh my God, how could I be so stupid? Or you just carry on. And if you're going to carry on, you are now, I think inevitably, seeking to persuade yourself and those around you that you knew all along you were voting for all the things that the Remain campaign said would happen. In other words, you cast your vote because you didn't believe your own side, but you did believe the other side. And once you've reached that point, well, there's a brilliant line in Dostoevsky about what happens when you lie to yourself. Nick's in Bristol. Nick, what's going on?
Hello, James.
Hello, Nick.
Well, first comment. Isn't it amazing what a shouty country Britain is becoming? Absolutely astonishing.
I suppose shouting is the best way to avoid being asked to explain yourself. It's kind of it's the volume-based equivalent of empty slogans and fatuous sound bites, isn't it?
Indeed. How do we get to this? Well, can we define where you think this is and where I think it is?
What if we disagree?
I think this is actually, amazingly, May being on the verge of succeeding in cramming her rotten deal down the throats of the British people.
Do you? I mean, there is a school of thought that says that the ERG will buckle and go along with it. But
well, it's not just the ERG. She's got the DUP cornered as well.
You think?
And actually,
go on. Tell me how that works.
Well, but the government have done two semi-smart things in the last few days. Number one, Gove stood up and said no deal would mean reimposing direct rule on Northern Ireland.
Yes.
Number two...
yes, you're paying attention. There was a very specific audience for that observation. The problem is, and I don't know where you're going...
When they released the specimen tariffs for a no-deal outcome, and all of that exemptions for Northern Ireland, which is absolutely going to clobber businesses in Ulster.
Yes.
And the DUP are now coming under a lot of pressure from their backers.
I'm going to come with you halfway on this, because there's one problem in your analysis, I think, and that is this, that the DUP would be split on the issue of Home Rule, and if you were a real hardcore unionist, what would you rather have, Home Rule or shared government with Sinn Féin?
Oh God! Well, no contest. Of course, they'll go for preservation of the union.
They'll go for Home Rule.
This is not preservation of the union, because Truss actually admitted on Politics Live, I think, but that there would be actual checks on the border. So all this rubbish about it would be for the EU to impose a hard border, it wouldn't be us. That's gone out of the window as well.
So you think that she was... But that's only 10 votes. I grant you, if everyone else in the Conservative Party...
They're the bellwether, aren't they?
Well, the ERG said... I kind of hope...
The ERG follow.
What do you want to happen? Because there is...
OK, so I'm praying that the MPs hold their nerves and that not too many... quislings come over from Labour to support the deal.
Right. So you want...
and that it actually...
But you risk something there. Sorry to interrupt you, but you do risk... Because I'm quite... I oscillate slightly. I'm 90% where you are, but 10% of me is so spooked by the prospect of crashing out that you'd almost take any deal at all.
I honestly don't think we're going to crash out because
14 days, mate.
I just cannot see any sort of a government with any shred of responsibility in allowing that. I mean, quite apart.
Yes, but the government might not be able to stop it.
People will die.
Yes, well,
and, just think of the lawsuits and the compensation claims that would have to be paid.
You're being rational, and the government might not be able to stop it.
Yeah, OK, well, fair enough. But, look, there are two potential outcomes. One is that the May deal scrapes home by one or two, a margin of, say, 10 votes.
Well, one vote is enough.
The other one is it marginally fails, and then... unbelievably, she will bring it back a fourth time, but this time she might have to do it on the Kyle Wilson amendment, which says, OK, Labour will back it, but you have to put it to the people.
I can't see
at that
now.
Point, it's just possible that we finally get a vote on this rubbish.
There's a danger. I think I don't want to preempt a caller who's in the queue, but of course, it depends what the vote's on. If it's a vote between May's deal and no deal... That's almost Hobson's choice, isn't it?
It's possible.
Sophie's choice.
I mean, if there was any I think the Electoral Commission would probably...
They wouldn't allow that to happen.
Well.
Remain has to be on the ballot paper for the very simple reason that it's the only thing that is actually easy to understand. All of the other deals are either shrouded in fantasy or absurdly complicated or, of course, still barking at the... unicorn moon. Nick, thank you. Squeeze in Buzz in Bedford. Buzz, can you do it in a minute or not?
I can try.
Go on, Buzz.
Well, basically, I'm a passionate Remainer.
Yeah.
But I wholeheartedly believe that we should not have a people's vote or a second referendum.
Fair enough.
Because I don't think it will get us anywhere. What's happened is the Tory party are tearing themselves apart and they want to put the responsibility back on us, which is what David Cameron did in the first
No, they
place.
desperately don't want to do that, actually.
You think?
Yeah, they're fighting tooth and nail to resist the people's vote, and so would much of Labour, oddly, because you on an individual level, MPs in Leave constituencies would have a nightmare on their hands.
But they can't find a way out of this. Don't you see that it's a way
because
of
there isn't
them
one.
off?
There isn't a way out of it. And you're right. So you have to have another vote, because if you're going to call it off, the politicians aren't going to have the courage to do it independently. They're going to have to hope that the people does it for them.
And you just hit the nail on the head. That exactly is. They have to, I don't want to say man up, but they have to be honest with us, speak to us like we're children, because we are when it comes to matters of the EU and all the ramifications of leaving.
Tell me about
they need to tell us that, look, this cannot happen.
I'm not going to argue with you, but you're looking for political courage, let alone confidence. And there's plenty of political confidence on the side of people who are talking undiluted nonsense, but very, very little courage. And on the side of the people who do understand what's going on, there's no courage at all. Because, with exceptions, of course, people who've left their own party to start a new grouping, that's courageous. But otherwise, Buzz, I'm afraid I would agree with you, up to and including the utter absence of any alternative plan that might deliver sanity. Which means you throw it back to the people with no guarantee that they won't come back and deliver another dose of insanity, because our media isn't going to change. It's quite possible. I think there was a story this week about some weird grouping that all they know about it is that it's run by some bloke that had a script writing credit on 3 pints of lager and a packet of crisps, and they're currently spending more money on Facebook adverts in preparation for a potential second referendum than any political party in the country. Nobody knows who they are. Nobody knows where the money's come from. But there we are. 12:46. Just a couple of responses to my, it's not a revelation, what would you call it, report? I don't know. Anyway, I told you earlier that a fruit and veg importer that I know well, one of my top contacts, in fact, in the field of Brexit preparations, described how the Calais delays were now nibbling at fresh food supplies. This means that some goods are already arriving perished, so some lorries are being sent back without being unloaded. He wonders where the news coverage is. I'm not surprised, pal, to be honest with you, because this is real life. Now we'll do a 10-minute segment on Boris Johnson's new haircut. Oh, no, we won't. I'm sorry, we've scrapped that item. Here's Andrew Bridgen to wang on ignorantly about something he doesn't understand. And that's what we will be calling the news. So some replies to that suggestion. I think this is the one that perhaps is most pertinent from Mark. Our small family company imports fresh fruit from the EU on a daily basis, and this is 100% correct. This week, our Dutch transporter cancelled all of their crossings via the tunnel. It's the first time they have ever done that, and this is before any border or paperwork checks begin. Some, of course, what's the word I'm looking for? Yeah, the situation in France is like a kind of pretend practice for what might happen. I think that the French port workers are saying we're not ready for Brexit. This is what will happen when Brexit happens. Look how unready we are. So I guess if you were looking for silver lining or positives, you could say, well, that means they might get ready or they might be ready. But then I come back and say, why are we doing this? Why are we doing this? And you say, blue passports. And then you say, hello, foreign politicians. Any chance you could help frustrate the will of the British Sovereign Parliament? Because it's really important that our project that was sold on the back of foreign politicians frustrating the will of the Sovereign Parliament in Britain goes ahead. Great piece on Bloomberg as well about hedge funds making a ton of money out of what happened to the pound on the night of the Brexit vote. I tweeted that before I came on air. I will tweet it again after I come off air, because I know that you don't want to spend your whole weekend pretending that Brexit's not happening. If you do, I'll see you at Griffin Park tomorrow for the Brentford game. Lloyd is in Lewisham. Lloyd, what would you like to say?
I'd like to say I know how we got here.
Go on.
We got here because there are a few Leave MPs who have no idea how EU works.
You're not getting any prizes for that, pal.
Yeah, but the problem is, because I said to some of my Leave friends, how could somebody want to leave for 30 years and have no idea how to do it?
Yep.
It makes
That's a
no
really
sense.
good question, actually.
Do you think, I mean, I work...
I am going to give you a prize for that last bit. You spent 30 years saying we have to do this, and you didn't have 10 seconds worth of hard thought on how.
Exactly. It makes no sense. I would be out of a job if I did that.
So would I. Actually, no, I probably wouldn't, but I have quite an odd job.
So all they've based this on is slogans.
Well, no,
have no
what I
idea.
would have to do, I would have to leave LBC to work for another radio station, but I'd have to build the radio station myself to be the same as these leavers.
No, you wouldn't be. You would be more informed because at least you know what's meant to happen.
Yeah, but I didn't know how to make a microphone, mate. David Davis needs to do whatever the Brexit equivalent would be of making his own microphone.
No, you would know that you need the microphone. He didn't know he needed
He
a
didn't
microphone.
even know he needed a microphone. He thought he could just close his eyes, tap his heels together and say, there's no place like Brexit, there's no place like Brexit, and he'd suddenly arrive there.
And that is the problem. And I've been saying to
you're right.
till I'm blue in my face, they don't know how to do it.
Because you can't do it. It's like getting the eggs out of a baked cake. Bada bing, bada boom.
Well, all I know is that some of these empty slogans, and there's one thing that really gets me.
Go on.
They need us more than we need them when it came to the car stuff. That will be
Not
true.
just the cars, that was for everything, mate. That was a French Prosecco. Yes.
That would be true if we still made a Leg Rosa and Triumph Dolomites and Austin
I
Lights.
don't
We
know
don't make them no more.
I don't know if it even would be true then, my friend, to be honest with you, but it might at least have a semblance of potential plausibility.
No, but we can say to them, we're not going to buy your cars, we're going to drive our own cars, we're going to make our own cars. We don't do that anymore.
Yeah, I know.
None of it made any sense.
Yeah, I know.
And I've got a couple of friends, and when I say to them, everything that you've said, why you voted Brexit, has been proved to be wrong.
Are they pretending that they knew that all along yet? Are they saying,
no, they're not.
Oh, they
No,
will.
they're not.
Give it a
They're
week.
saying there's a saying, oh, well, I will still vote the same way.
We voted Leave because we believed all of the Remain campaigners. We knew all the Leave campaigners were lying. That's why we voted Leave. I get that on a daily basis.
People are afraid to admit they're wrong. I hate admitting that I'm wrong.
So
but
do
when
I.
I am wrong, I admit it.
So do I.
And that's the problem.
That's
And
what my
where
next
it's got.
book. That's what my next book's going to be about. Admitting when you're
Well,
wrong.
Well, I did buy your book for one of my Leave friends.
How to be right. It's got that
Yeah,
quote in the front, that Dostoevsky quote in the front that I just shared a moment ago. Do you remember it?
No.
Above all, don't lie to yourself. The man who lies to himself and listens to his own lie comes to a point that he cannot distinguish the truth within him or around him, and so loses all respect for himself and for others. And having no respect, Lloyd, he ceases to love.
Never a truer word said.
There it is, Dostoevsky, dropping truth bombs since, go on, Shields, when was he born?
Late 1800s?
Since the late 1800s. Lloyd, mind how you go? This is a clever question from Ian, who clearly heard the call with Alan, son of Kidderminster, who was on earlier from Waterlooville. He says, James, do you ever think... do you ever think that people are phoning you now just to get into your next book? Do you know what? In Alan's case, it's a possibility. Phil's in Maidenhead with what may well be the last word of the week, because as you may have gathered, the Fogarty is in the building.
1821, actually.
1820.
Yeah, died 1881.
She's good, isn't she?
Shame
Look at
on
that.
me.
Hello.
Hello, Phil. Sorry, mate. Me and Shields were just
That's all right.
chewing the fat.
No, you
What do
go
you
for
want
it, mate.
What do you want to say?
Well, I'll be honest with you. I think the way the country is now at the moment, it's all down to our lovely parliamentary MPs have got there. And basically, they've got us into this position.
What could they have done differently, Phil? Because
What could have they done differently?
Yeah.
Right, okay. Let's go down to the playground, shall we? Go back to basics.
Go on.
There were 48% of the country decided, no, we want to remain. 52% wanted to leave. Those people are in power, and basically they should have just taken the decision that the 52 wanted and basically ran with it. That's what the people wanted.
They did.
And exactly. We've had since then, in the last, 3 months, we've had those parliamentary MPs that we all voted for. Some of them have decided to leave and set up their own independent little parties, etc. Whoopie-doo. If this was industry...
That's because...
If this was industry...
Hang on, mate.
No. If this was industry...
Well, yes.
And if this was industry and a company has basically had been said to have made a decision... If it was a wrong decision, the man at the top would have had to fall on his sword and bow out gracefully.
So who made a wrong decision then, Phil?
I think it's all the MPs together. They've all made the wrong decision. But
the ones you chose as the best example of the MPs who've made the wrong decision are the ones who've literally walked away from their own parties in protest at how their own parties have behaved. So that's why I interrupted you, because I was worried that you were going to make a fool of yourself, and then you went and did it.
But okay, I make a fool of myself. But let's think of the
let's
Red
not.
Party.
Actually, I tried to interrupt you so that we could have a fruitful and constructive conversation, but you did insist on pressing on ahead. Can I just clarify how you voted in the referendum, Phil?
I actually voted to leave.
And how would you vote
now,
next time?
I would vote Remain.
There you go. We rescued our friendship at the final hurdle. That's it for another week from me, James O'Brien, on LBC.